A South African man adopted a baby hippo after rescuing it from a river. 5 years later, the hippo dragged him into that same river and mauled him to death. Last January, a Kansas man died after being shot by his dog in a freak hunting accident. He was sitting in the front seat of his pickup truck when his dog stepped on his rifle in the back seat. In 2011, a 49-year-old Russian woman had a heart attack and was presumed dead. A few days later, she woke up at her own wake and was so shocked that she screamed and had another heart attack, this time dying for real. In 1991, a woman from Thailand accidentally slipped in mud, grabbed a live wire, and was electrocuted to death. Later that day, when her sister was showing the neighbors how the accident happened, she slipped, grabbed the same live wire, and was electrocuted to death. Here's a pair of gloves with bladed fingertips from London during the Victorian era. They were likely worn as self-defense gloves by wealthy women who had to take walks by themselves. A Dublin grocery store has a glass floor showcasing an 11th century Viking well that was discovered while the shop was being built. Last year, a perfectly preserved 1500-year-old era was found nestled between some rocks in Norway. The research team thinks it was encased in ice, then transported down slope as the ice melted. Here's the enormous tusk of a woolly mammoth found in Siberia that was most likely killed by ancient hunters around 12,000 years ago. The 12-angled stone was part of a 700-year-old stone wall inside of an Incan palace. To this day, the joints are so perfectly cut that not even a single sheet of paper can fit between any of the blocks, not to mention its incredible size. In 1663, part of the fossilized skeleton of a woolly rhinoceros was dug up in Germany. Nicknamed the Magdeburg unicorn, it resulted in one of the worst fossil reconstructions in human history. This was the sample case used by a neon salesman circa 1935. Dating back at least 12,000 years, Iran's ancient village of Maymun is said to be a primary human residence in the Iranian plateau. Close to 200 families still live in the hand-dug homes within the rocks, some of which have been inhabited for over 3,000 years. After 25 years of dealing with a strange dip in the floor beneath his couch, a man from Plymouth, England finally decided to investigate. After digging down into his home's foundation, he found a 33-foot deep medieval well with a 500-year-old sword inside. The sword's super lame looking, I wasn't gonna include it, but there you go. Game of Thrones star Emilia Clarke has survived 2 near-fatal brain aneurysms that have left pieces of her brain missing. She has since founded a charity called Same You, which helps provide treatment for people who have suffered a brain injury or stroke. A baby penguin was born without feathers at a Chinese zoo and was therefore rejected by his parents. But zookeepers found out he just had some digestive issues, so they fed him by hand until he grew his feathers and was soon reunited with his family. Before the year 1772, potatoes were deemed inedible and were only used as hog feed across Europe. But a French soldier who was taken as POW was fed only potatoes during his captivity and survived. Feeling like he should have died, he made it his life's mission to convince the world of the nutritional value of potatoes. And his tomb is often decorated with potatoes as tribute to this day. During World War II, the Nazis used crooked picture bombs specifically intended for officers. When retreating, they left paintings on the walls and tilted them to the side, so when someone straightened them, they were rigged to explode. Hannibal of Carthage was famous for intimidating his Roman enemies with war elephants. But the Romans eventually learned that elephants are afraid of squealing pigs. So they would lather pigs in tar and set them on fire, sending the enemy elephants fleeing in horror. During World War II, Soviet forces tried to train dogs to run under enemy tanks with bombs strapped to their backs. However, this evil plan ended up failing miserably. Because the dogs were trained using Soviet tanks, when it came to the real battlefield, many dogs ended up running under friendly Soviet tanks, blowing them up instead. April 15th has been a notoriously tragic day in our world's history. Lincoln's assassination, the sinking of the Titanic, the Hillsborough disaster, the Boston bombing, and the Notre Dame Cathedral fire all occurred on April 15th. Many Japanese people who witnessed the nuclear blast in Hiroshima were blinded instantly. Some were even left with permanent atomic bomb cataracts like this one. While his comrades were being shot all around him, a Canadian piper named Bill Millen was playing the bagpipes during the storming of Normandy. German snipers later said they didn't shoot him because they thought he had gone mad. When the Soviet Union was pushing towards Berlin, a Nazi SS soldier was forced to play piano for his captors. They made it clear to him in sign language that he would be executed the moment he stopped playing. He played for 22 straight hours, after which he collapsed in tears. They congratulated him, then shot him. A Reddit user known as Mr. Griff discovered an entire house in his attic. He said the creepy home used to be a 2-story building where the owners lived upstairs and ran a shop out of the ground floor. The building was later built into a church whose owners simply built around it and left the original home to rot in the attic. This pool of cave water was completely isolated for hundreds of thousands of years until it was discovered deep in the caverns of New Mexico. This Wagyu steak is so rare that many might even say it's still mooing. Biologist Tim Wong single-handedly repopulated the extremely rare pipevine swallowtail butterfly in his San Francisco backyard. When he noticed their population was plummeting, he created a safe habitat for them to flourish and completely revived the species within a 7-year span. This record-breaking 10-inch long tadpole found in an Arizona swamp never evolved into a bullfrog. Experts say it's most likely due to a hormonal mutation that'll prevent it from metamorphosing until death. Bill Gates has a periodic table in his office that's complete with samples or representations of all the elements. Filmed almost 3,000 feet deep in the waters of Japan, this alien-like siphonophore will make you never want to swim in the ocean again. Jesus. Qatari fishermen were treated to this extremely rare devil horns eclipse during extraordinary sunrise conditions. Australian scientists have created the rarest meatball in the world by cultivating flesh using the genetic sequence of an extinct woolly mammoth. But no one's willing to try it since the 5,000-year-old proteins might be toxic to humans. This photo shows The Undertaker looking down at medical staff after chokeslamming Mick Foley through the roof of Hell in a Cell. The 16-foot fall was completely unplanned and left Foley with bruised ribs, a dislocated jaw, and internal bleeding. The Undertaker was certain he'd just killed a man, but Foley managed to get up and even complete the match. During a 1999 pay-per-view event, Owen Hart plummeted 78 feet to his death when the harness lowering him to the ring snapped. Former Japanese wrestler Hayabusa is considered to be a pioneer of high flying in the sport, but his career ended abruptly in 2001 after a botched backflip left him paralyzed from the neck down. The world record for alcohol consumption was set by pro wrestler Andre the Giant. The 7'4" monster once drank 156 beers in one sitting, which is just under 15 gallons. Once considered a wrestling legend, Chris Benoit murdered his wife and son before taking his own life in 2007. After multiple tests were conducted, it was revealed that his head was so damaged from concussions that he had the brain of an 85-year-old with a severe form of dementia, perhaps contributing to his horrific behavior. This video shows the moment a chimpanzee at a Chinese zoo threw a water bottle at an innocent bystander. A male tourist apparently threw the bottle into the enclosure to mess with him, and the chimp retaliated with a perfectly calculated shot. Here's an incredible clip of what appears to be a friendly crow helping a hedgehog cross the street. Crows understand the concept of death and will try to avoid particular places that they deem dangerous. Elephants in Thailand have learned to exploit their right-of-way by forcing sugarcane trucks to stop so that they can steal a snack. With 3 times the amount of neurons compared to humans, this goes to show why elephants are considered to be one of the most intelligent animals in the world. The tallest person in recorded history was a young man from Illinois named Robert Wadlow. A mutated pituitary gland resulted in his breathtaking height of 8'11", weighing 440 pounds with a shoe size of 36. In 1940, he died at the young age of 22 from a septic blister on his ankle caused by a poorly fitted iron brace. The world's largest family can be found in India, where father Ziona Chana had 94 children with 39 different wives. This 10-foot wide, 500-pound shell made in Malta set a world record in 2016 for the largest firework ever launched. Costing over $3.5 billion to construct, Saudi Arabia's Abraj Khudai is set to become the largest hotel in the world. It'll feature 4 helipads, 70 restaurants, and 10,000 rooms. This iconic 1987 photo shows Dr. Zbigniew Religa checking his patient's vitals after performing the first successful heart transplant in Poland. His colleague can be seen sleeping in the corner after assisting with the 23-hour-long surgery. Even though the operation was considered to be borderline impossible at the time, he took the chance and it was a complete success, as the grateful patient ended up living on for another 30 years. Price is Right legend Bob Barker reportedly plans on dying broke after donating most of his $70 million fortune to animal foundations and rescues. third man syndrome is an unseen presence frequently reported by mountain climbers in near-death situations. The presence has been said to give practical advice to the victim while offering comfort and encouragement during the ordeal. On 9/11, a guide dog named Roselle led a group of people, including her blind owner, down 78 flights of stairs before the North Tower collapsed. She stopped only once to give kisses to a woman who was having a panic attack. In Japan in the 1920s, Hachiko the Akita became famous for meeting his owner every day at the railroad station. Even after his owner died, he continued to make the same journey every single day for 9 straight years. In 2014, 3-year-old Karina Chikatova survived in the Siberian wilderness for 11 days with no one except her dog. She ate wild berries, drank from a river, and curled up with her dog for warmth. She was saved when her dog managed to find her village and guide rescuers toward her. During the California Tubbs fire in 2017, a guard dog named Odin refused to leave his flock of goats behind while his owners fled to safety. Days later, the owners returned to their decimated property to find Odin and all of the goats still alive. In 1731, King Frederick of Sweden sent a taxidermist his favorite lion after it died. But the taxidermist had never seen a lion before, so this was the result, the derpiest lion in the world. Here are some carbonized loaves of bread that were found in the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum, both of which were buried in volcanic ash following the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. These stair dust corners were introduced in the 1800s to make sweeping easier. They would prevent dust from accumulating in the corners. Here's what the Great Pyramid of Giza looked like 4,500 years ago compared to today. All the pyramids were originally covered in polished white limestone, while the capstone at the top was covered in gold. In the summer of 2018 in Crete, a farmer was trying to park in the shade of an olive tree on his property. Suddenly the ground gave out and he discovered an ancient Minoan tomb that hadn't been touched in at least 3,400 years. Jack Black's character in the 2006 masterpiece Nacho Libre is based on a real Mexican priest. Sergio Gutierrez Benitez fought as a lucha libre wrestler for 23 years to support the orphanage he founded. While Captain Robert Campbell was a prisoner of the Germans during World War I, he asked the Kaiser if he could visit his dying mother in England. Surprisingly, the Kaiser gave him permission on the grounds that he returned to prison afterwards. True to his word, the captain came back. In April of 1988, the roof of an Aloha Airlines jet ripped off after an explosive decompression at 24,000 feet. A flight attendant named Clarabelle Lansing was sadly thrown from the plane while serving a drink, and her body was never found. But she was miraculously the only fatality, as the plane somehow managed to land safely and spare the other 94 lives on board. During the Holocaust, gay males were identified in concentration camps by downward-facing pink triangles. Because of this identification, many of them were still considered criminals after their camps were liberated. As a result, many of them were sent back to prison to serve out their terms. A Japanese soldier named Hiro Onada was stranded on an island for 30 years without knowing that World War II had ended. His commander had to travel to the island to personally dismiss him in 1974. American Lieutenant John Fox died after deliberately calling an artillery strike on himself. Realizing that German troops were overriding his position, the strike delayed the enemy long enough for other American units to organize a counterattack that ultimately won them the battle. There was a famous Jewish boxer named Salomo Aruch who was imprisoned at Auschwitz. He was forced to fight fellow prisoners, and the loser was sent to the gas chambers. He survived more than 200 fights over a 2-year span until the camp was liberated. 80% of the males born in the Soviet Union in 1923 were killed during World War II. This is a group of teenage kamikaze pilots posing with a cute puppy on the day before their suicide missions in 1945. In 1951, an atomic bomb cameraman accidentally ripped off his safety goggles a few seconds before the bomb exploded. With no time to spare, he immediately covered his eyes with his hands, and when the bomb detonated, he saw the bones of his hands through his closed eyelids just like an X-ray. Baltimore serial killer Joseph Matheny would slay his victims before stripping them of their flesh. He would then mix the human meat with pork and sell it to unassuming customers at his roadside burger stand. Robert Hansen was responsible for the murders of at least 17 women throughout the 70s and 80s. He would first abduct his victims and fly them to his isolated cabin in the Alaskan wilderness, which was only accessible by boat or plane. He would then release them into the wild and hunt them down like animals using a hunting rifle. Nicknamed the Toy Box Killer, David Parker Ray abducted his victims before drugging them. Once they woke up, he played a recording in which he described the torture that they were about to endure over the next few months, much of which involved the use of chains, whips, knives, and surgical tools. He's believed to have tortured and killed more than 60 women in his soundproof trailers. Author Lewis Carroll wanted to marry an 11-year-old girl named Alice when he was 31. It's widely believed that his book Alice in Wonderland was inspired by his obsession for little Alice Liddell. If Finding Nemo was scientifically accurate, Nemo's dad would have turned into a female and mated with Nemo after his mom died. When Disney released Princess and the Frog, it caused a minor salmonella outbreak across the country. Over 50 kids were hospitalized after kissing a frog. The reason why Beauty and the Beast was written was to encourage young girls to become more accepting of arranged marriages. Following 9/11, an entire scene from Lilo and Stitch had to be edited. A 747 airliner that was flying through a city was changed to a spaceship flying through the mountains. Made sometime before 1834, this sealskin whaling suit from Greenland is the only complete suit of its kind in the world. The hunter climbed in through the center hole and made the suit waterproof by pulling the hole closed. In 1972, a man snorkeling along the coast of Italy called the police when he noticed a human hand sticking out of the sand. It ended up being two ancient Greek bronze statues that were sculpted around 500 BC. This ancient Roman temple theater complex was discovered in Italy by total chance in the year 2000. Located on the tip of a mountain, the complex dates back to the 4th century BCE. This 4,000-year-old golden ram and stone lion were found inside of a tomb at Göner Tepe in Turkmenistan. The finger in the background shows how small these figures truly are, a testament to the incredible skills of the craftsmen from this time. In 1948, a man named Tony Signorini stomped around a beach in Florida wearing a pair of 30-pound lead shoes. For the next 40 years, he had locals convinced that a 15-foot-tall penguin was waddling around the area. In 1979, billionaire Richard Branson released a hot air balloon shaped like a UFO over the streets of London. The next morning, local police forces were mobilized and even the army was alerted. When the balloon landed, Branson had also paid a little person to walk out dressed like E.T. On April 1, 1975, residents of Sitka, Alaska woke up to the nearby dormant volcano blowing out black smoke. When a Coast Guard pilot went to investigate, he found 70 burning tires and the words April Fool spray painted into the snow. The Sweet Track is a Neolithic timber walkway discovered in England that's right around 6,000 years old. It was part of a network of wooden tracks built to provide a dry path across the marshy ground, and is known as the oldest surviving man-made walkway in the world. Found in the Judean desert in Israel, this 9,000-year-old stone mask is said to be the oldest known intact mask in the world. This 3,000-year-old foot of an Egyptian mummy was found with a prosthetic toe. The amazingly crafted object is likely the earliest prosthesis ever found. Here's a comparison of the world's oldest underground train station in London 160 years ago versus today. The Greenland shark is believed to be the oldest living vertebrate species in the world. This specimen is believed to be over 400 years old, meaning it was roaming the depths before the Pilgrims even entered America. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the US government issued Mickey Mouse gas masks in case of a chemical attack. The incentive was to make them appear less scary to kids, but most people don't think it worked. The US originally planned on dropping an atomic bomb on the historic Japanese city of Kyoto. The only reason it wasn't nuked was because US Secretary of War Henry Stimson spent his honeymoon there and said it was too nice to bomb. So instead of Kyoto, they chose Nagasaki. In 1944, a Nazi officer ordered his troops to hold their fire to allow the rescue of an American soldier who had stepped on a landmine. When no one came for help, the officer went to rescue the soldier but stepped on a landmine himself, killing him instantly. When she was 16 years old, Annalise Michaels started eating her own hands and drinking her urine while suffering from seizures and delusions. But her devout Christian family denied medical reasoning and instead blamed the devil. She underwent 67 different exorcisms and weighed less than 70 pounds by the time of her death. In 1998, 2-year-old Harrison Johnson was stung 432 times after disturbing a yellow jacket's nest in Florida. His parents simply asked locals to pray for him since their religion viewed medical care as witchcraft. They didn't bring him to the hospital until he stopped breathing more than 7 hours later, and he likely died an excruciating death. In 1991, a Nigerian prophet felt inspired by the story of David in the Bible and wanted to recreate it. So he went into a lion's cage at the zoo, believing that God would keep their mouths shut. Within seconds, he was completely torn to shreds. In 2018, American missionary John Allen Chow illegally traveled to North Sentinel Island to preach Christianity to an uncontacted tribe. He was well aware that the Sentinelese people were extremely violent toward outsiders, but he believed that God would protect him. Before he even stepped foot on land, he was greeted with an arrow through the heart. In 1913, a 12-year-old black girl named Sarah Rector was given land deemed unsuitable for farming, but it turned out to be rich with oil and she became a millionaire overnight. She was known as the richest colored girl in the world, and Oklahoma legislation even made an effort to have her legally declared white. These natural ice formations in Antarctica look like structures built by the ancient Romans. An electric company in Arkansas was forced to post this PSA after someone took out a power line with an unbelievable arrow shot. Mario Puzo, the author of the Godfather books who also adapted them to film, had no idea what he was doing since he'd never written a script before. After winning 2 Oscars, he decided to buy a book on screenwriting to learn how to improve. In the very first chapter, it said to study the first Godfather film. In the history of the MLB, there have only been 3 players with the first name Aurelio. Amazingly but tragically, they all died the same way, by car accident. Many historians consider Brooklyn player Jim Creighton to be the first superstar of baseball, but he died suddenly in 1862 after swinging so hard on a home run ball that he ruptured his bladder. During the 1910s, there was an American baseball team completely consisting of death row prisoners. As long as they kept winning, their executions were delayed. In 1957, a woman attending a Phillies game was hit with a foul ball that broke her nose. The game was briefly paused and then resumed once the woman was put on a stretcher. As they carried her away, the very next pitch was fouled off and hit the exact same woman, breaking a bone in her knee. Aeschylus was an ancient Greek playwright who is known today as the father of the tragedy genre. After receiving a prophecy that said he would die from a falling object, he spent most of his time outdoors. But he was killed when an eagle dropped a tortoise on him, mistaking his bald head for a rock suitable for shattering the shell of a reptile. Famous philosopher Kurt Gödel had an obsessive fear of being poisoned and therefore only ate food that was cooked by his wife. So when his wife went to the hospital for an extended stay, Gödel stopped eating completely and promptly starved to death. The first person to ever jump off the Brooklyn Bridge was a professional high diver. He wanted to demonstrate that people don't die simply from falling through the air, and he was correct. He fell 135 feet through the air without a problem, but hitting the water killed him immediately. This photo is the definition of fear. A young woman from LA was evading a home intruder by hiding on her roof, where she managed to grab her phone and call 911. She said her greatest fear was that the intruder would try to hide where she was hiding. Luckily, authorities soon had the area surrounded and the man is now in prison. Here's some disturbing footage of an old lady with a knife approaching the front door of a New Jersey home at 3 a.m. As creepy as the footage may seem, the poor woman is most likely just suffering from dementia. And finally, this is why you should always be aware of your surroundings while scuba diving. This South African salvage diver nearly had his head taken off by a great white, but luckily the shark wasn't hungry at the time. Vietnam War veteran Rick Rescorla was the director of security at Morgan Stanley when the Twin Towers were attacked on 9/11. After watching the first explosion from his South Tower window, Rick ignored the announcement that urged employees to stay put, instead grabbing his bullhorn and started evacuating his 2,700 employees. He encouraged them by singing Cornish songs just like he did in Vietnam and ended up saving all but 9 of his employees. Rescorla was last seen on the 10th floor of the South Tower, running up the stairs to rescue more people just minutes before the tower collapsed. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. conducted a psychological warfare scheme known as Operation Wandering Soul. The Army played creepy sounds and voices through loudspeakers to represent the spirits of dead Viet Cong soldiers. Here's an example of a recording. In 2013, Sweden submerged a neon sign of a gay soldier to deter Russian submarines from entering their waters. Using sonar, the sign emits the message, "This way if you are gay," in Morse code. There have been no reports of Russian submarine sightings ever since. In 1880, the Queen of Thailand's boat capsized on the way to her palace. But despite many witnesses, nobody dared to save the drowning queen and her daughter. This was because touching the queen under any circumstances was a crime punishable by death. Bobby Leach was a world-renowned daredevil who became the second person to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. A few years later, he died from a vicious infection after slipping on an orange peel. In 1996, a man named Michael Paul was on his way home from church when he decided to crack his neck just like any other time. But a few minutes afterwards, he suddenly started sweating profusely and then went pale. By the time Michael was brought to a hospital, he had already slipped into a coma and died after 12 days of being on life support. An autopsy later revealed that the neck crack must have damaged one of the main arteries to his brain and resulted in a fatal stroke. In 2008, a Brazilian priest strapped 1,000 balloons onto a lawn chair and rode it into the sky as part of a fundraiser. He was able to reach an altitude of around 20,000 feet before losing contact with authorities. Over a month later, the lower half of his body was found floating near an oil rig. British entrepreneur Jimmy Heselden became the CEO of Segway Inc. after purchasing the company in 2009. The next year, he died from blunt force trauma after falling off a cliff on a Segway. Every year, about 150 people are killed by falling coconuts across the globe. Famous whiskey distiller Jack Daniel died after kicking his safe in frustration because he forgot his combination. He injured his big toe and it got infected, so he had to have his entire foot amputated. But the infection spread to the rest of his body and he died from blood poisoning. A 57-year-old woman was riding a boat in Florida when an eagle ray suddenly leaped out of the water. The 75-pound ray smacked her directly in the head and she died almost immediately of a shattered skull. Attila the Hun was one of the most feared rulers throughout Europe during his reign, known for his brutal pillaging of Roman cities during the 5th century. But on his wedding night, he got drunk, fell asleep in his bed, and died of a nosebleed. A 17-year-old boy from Mexico City died after his girlfriend gave him a hickey. The suction created a blood clot that traveled to his brain, eventually causing a stroke. A Texas man was warned by bystanders to not go swimming in a harbor that was filled with alligators. But he shouted his last words, "F them alligators," before jumping in and being torn to shreds. George Washington died when his doctors were trying to cure his sore throat. They were using a process called bloodletting, which involved draining a patient's blood until their illness was cured. He lost nearly half his blood before they stopped the treatment, and he died a few hours afterwards. 26-year-old Mark Leeson suffocated in his sleep after shoving 2 tampons up his nose before going to bed. Apparently, he was just trying to find a solution for his snoring problem. It's estimated that throughout the world, about 25 people are killed by champagne corks every year. A British student was once taking an exam and couldn't handle the stress and anxiety anymore. So he put 2 pencils up his nostrils and headbutted the desk, forcing the pencils through his brain. He died instantly and all the other students got automatic A's.